Welcome to Games from Folktales, a podcast that mixes historical research and tabletop role-playing settings. I'm your host, Timothy Ferguson. This week, A Revener on the Lagoons, from Horatio Brown. I found a little ghost story in my researches for Venice, and it's what we call a Revener in Ars Magica. See Realms of Power, the Infernal for statistics. I'm not using the story in the Venice material, although I do suggest a valet, as described later, might make a good navigable point outside the Shrouded Glen ritual, which hides a covenant on a lost island. And now over to Horatio Brown. For many centuries, the lagoons of Venice have been divided into districts for the purposes of fishing. These tracts of water are not distinguished by any boundaries visible to the eye, but their limits are well known to the fishermen who make their living upon them. In the shallower parts, where the oozy bed of the lagoon is left bare at each receding tide, the fishermen mark off a certain portion and surround it by a palisade of wattled cane called a grissola. Inside this palisade, the mud is dug into deep ditches so that there shall always be water in them, even when the tide is low. These enclosures are called valli, and here the fish are driven in spring to respawn. Each valle has a little hut belonging to it, built either on piles or on forced soil, and made of bricks or of wattled cane plastered with mud. The hut usually contains one square room, a door, and 2 windows. The fishermen require these cabins, for they sometimes spend 3 or 4 days together in the remote lagoon, sending their fish to market every morning by one of their number, just as the deep sea fishes of Chioggia do. In the 15th century there were 61 of these valli, but many have now been destroyed, and the high tides flow uninterruptedly over the larger portion of the lagoon's surface. Those which still exist for the most part in the remote and little frequented reaches, and follow closely the line of the mainland, while towards the Lidi hardly any are in work. For though the landscape of these distant fishing grounds is vast and solitary, the sense of loneliness is heightened by the isolated hut, rising square out of the water, the only habitation visible. On all sides the seeming endless plain stretches away. These valli lie near the mainland. The earth is so low that the eye perceives no difference of level, but passes on until it rests at length against the faint blue Eugenian hills, or on the other side. Across the long grey water levels the sight may range mile upon mile of pearly surface, trending away till on the very offing it finds Venice, a rosy orange lotus basking on the water, or the Armenian convent a burning crimson point, or further still to the right some few solitary trees by the port of Malamocco. And the very names of these valli have a suggestion of the uncanny about them. The Val de Inferno, or the Valle de Sette Morti, for example. Of the Valle de Sette Morti there is a story current among the gondoliers and fishermen. There were 6 men fishing once in this valle of the 7 dead. They had with them a little boy, the son of one of their number. The boy did not go fishing with his father, but stayed behind to take care of the hut and to cook the food for the men when they returned. He spent the nights alone in the cabin, for most of the fishing was done between sunset and sunrise. One day, as the dawn was beginning across the water, the men stopped their fishing and began to row home with their load as usual. As they rowed along, they met the body of a drowned man going out with the tide. They picked the body up and laid it on the prow, the head resting upon the arm, and rowed slowly to the hut. The little boy was watching for them, and went down to the edge of the canal to meet them. He saw the body of the 7th man lying on the prow, and thought that he was asleep, so when the boat came near, he cried to his father, "Breakfast is ready, come along," and with that he turned and went back to the hut. The men followed the boy, leaving the dead man lying on the prow. When they'd sat down, the boy looked around and said, "Where's the other man? Why don't you bring him in to breakfast too?" "Oh, isn't he here?" cried one, and then added with a laugh, "You'd better go and call him, he must be asleep." The boy went down to the canal and shouted, "Why don't you come to breakfast? It is all ready for you." But the man on the prow never moved nor answered a word, so the boy returned to the hut and said, "What's the matter with the man? He won't answer." "Oh," they said, "he's a deaf old fool. You must shout and swear at him." The boy went back again and cried, "Come along, you fool. The others are waiting for you." But the man on the prow never moved nor answered a word. Then the boy ran back to the hut and said, "Come, one of you, for I can't wake him." But they laughed and answered, "Go out again and shake him by the leg. Tell him we can't wait till doomsday for him." The boy went down to the water once more. He got into the boat and shook the man by the leg. Then the man turned and sat up on the prow and said to the boy, What do you want?" "Why on earth don't you come? Are they to wait till doomsday for you?" "Go back and tell them that I am coming." So the boy went back to the hut and found the men laughing and joking. "Well, what did he say?" they cried. "It's all right," answered the boy. "He says he's coming." The men turned pale and looked at one another, and sat quite still and laughed no more. Then outside they heard footsteps coming slowly up the path. The door was pushed open, and the dead man came in and sat down in the boy's place, the seventh at the table. But the eyes of the other six were fixed upon the seventh, their guest. They could not move nor speak. Their gaze was fastened on the dead man's face. The blood flowed chiller and chiller in their veins, till, as the sun rose, there were 7 dead men sitting round the table in the room. Your saga may vary.